Thank you very much, Ignacio. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know if Karla managed to join us, because she sent me an email that she had some sort of like an emergency situation. So if she's able to jump in and join us, we'll be happy to give her the floor. In the meantime, allow me please to share a brief update about the DPM as an ISO 5116 standard. If I could, let me share the screen quickly. Okay, I think. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, thank
you. So it's going to be a relatively short update, but I think it's a fairly exciting for the Eurofiling community one, because after a very, very long time, after almost 2 years, which in ISO terms is considered a fast track, we have managed as a community to propose and approve and get the data point model methodology approved as an ISO standard 5116. It is currently available for download under the ISO on the ISO website. The data point model, as you know, has been in development and continuous application since 2009, pretty much, when the original group, so to say, the core team of the Eurofiling community, involving a number of experts from the central banks, gathered together and modeled the FINREP data point models tables based on the Banca d'Italia matrix schema, and is also based on the, of course, a lot on the XBRL dimension specification. The original data point model targeted FINREP and COREP, and soon it was expanded in terms of application. The EU organizations, the EBA, was the first one to recognize and take over the DPM, and provided to the entire community as the methodology, so to say, to be applicable for entire COREP FINREP reporting. That decision has been taken early in the second decade of our century. And later on, it was continuously expanded, not only in terms of the EBA so-called dictionary, but also very soon after that, IOPA joined and covered with the DPM description the entire insurance, reinsurance, and further on pension funds, more recently, the scope of reporting. That constitutes, so to say, EU-wide reporting of financial markets, of financial institutions, including private banking and insurance, of course, but nowadays also investment firms, and there are considerations for other entities as well. Many of you may know of a study conducted by DG FISMA, where they have covered some 23 regulatory frameworks in a single, so to say, DPM dictionary. This framework embraced different types of, this dictionary embraced different types of frameworks, not only the existing ones available from EBA, IOPA, or the Single Resolution Board, but also it expanded greatly into the domains which are at present using other standards such as ISO 20022, SDMX, or proprietary formats. For instance, the dictionary embraced certain alternative investment funds market directive, EMIR, MIFIR, SFTR, and others, and allowed the DG FISMA to analyze data requirements across institutions, regardless of, so to say, the industry or the types of products and so forth, or across industries and across types of products. So this EU application was always considered one of the major use cases and major uses of the data point model. However, very early on, back in, if I remember correctly, around 2012 or so, or 2011, the Bank of Israel has also decided to apply the DPM for the banking and statistical reporting, and it has continuously since then used the methodology to describe the requirements to the banking community. More recently, the South African Reserve Bank has also applied the methodology to describe the data scope for the entire banking, insurance, statistical, and some market infrastructure entities in South Africa, as well as the National Bank of Moldova, who has been a user of the DPM for several years as well now. So the standard has an application beyond Europe, although it is heavily Europe focused. There are multiple countries which use that, and multiple software vendors which rely on the expression of the data requirements according to the DPM. What is particularly worth mentioning is that the standard works extremely well as it was designed, of course, based on the principles and on the rules from the XBRL specification. It works extremely well with XBRL in a very nice complementary mode. It also works smoothly with standards such as SQL or API JSON type of objects. So from the perspective of interoperability, it provides the regulators an opportunity to disconnect, so to say, the logical description of data from the technological description of data from certain application of certain particular technology, including the possible limitations of these technologies. So that allows the business experts to actually step in and describe the different data requirements, the structures, the rules, the meaning of data, fully providing that to the stakeholders involved in the entire process. Now, this application has fueled the development of the data point model, and also within our community, we have undertaken back in 2013, 2014, thanks to the fantastic effort of a number of people who are on this call. So kudos to all of those who have been involved in the initial stage of standardization of the data point model in the form of the CEN Senelec XBRL workshop, where the first materials, the materials that documented and described what the data point model is and how it relates to the technologies such as XBRL were produced. These materials very importantly allowed for standardization of the DPM as an ISO 5116. Since according to an ISO process, a standard is either something that is that has already been fast-tracked from another standardization body. In our case, it was the well-recognized European committee, which deals with normalization and creation of standards. That was the path that we have chosen, and the fast track was submitted by the Eurofiling Foundation, which, as you know, governs, so to say, the Eurofiling community and coordinates it. The board of the Eurofiling Foundation has decided to put forward an application to ISO Technical Committee 68. This technical committee is responsible for variety of standards related to the financial domain. Specifically, the committee is responsible for standards such as ISO 20022. It is responsible for standards such as identification, like ISIN and LEI. It is also responsible for newly, so to say, created a digital token identifier, if I remember correctly, and a range of other standards, the ones that we use when we pull out our money from the ATMs or pay with cards for different transactions. So this committee, this technical committee, a very, very influential one, an international one, accepted our application and processed that. It actually received a strong support within the community, including from the chairs of the committee. And here I would like to thank very much both Karla and Ignacio for their contributed effort to make the data point model an ISO standard. What has happened is that ISO has reviewed the developments that were carried out by the CEN workshop back in 2014, and they were adapted by our board members to the form that was acceptable by ISO, and without changing, of course, the contents of the standardized elements. And it was put forward to the review. It received during the voting within the ISO community, which happened earlier this year, it received the majority, so to say, of the jurisdictions voting. What is particularly important about this support is that the bodies who voted are the so-called participating members in the Technical Committee 68. These participating members, I will get back to that in a second, because they are very important for the next steps, so to say, in the ISO 5116 review. But these participating members are typically standardization bodies in specific jurisdictions, in relevant jurisdictions. These are not necessarily current users of the data point model. So very important observation here is that these bodies somehow found value or observed value from standardizing and pushing through the fast track a standard that has not necessarily been applied even or known to them before. That obviously speaks a lot about both the needs and the standard itself. And there was only one really clarification question that came from one jurisdiction, which related to the dependencies between the DPM and ISO 20022, and it was very nicely responded by the chair of the TC68, where possibilities of use of the data point model as a logical layer for the ISO 20022 were highlighted, which expands greatly the possible application of the DPM as ISO 5116 in the future, and it mitigated, so to say, or it responded to the query, and henceforth the standard was approved by the majority of the participating members of the TC68. The standard has been published on the website of ISO in September this year, which makes it now a formal standard in a family of ISO standard with all the consequences, which means that changes to the standards should undergo governance and processes as applicable by the ISO organization. There is a structure of the working groups and other types of governance, so to say, entities to be established in order to provide and to support and to maintain the standard going forward. We are now at the stage where the TC68 will be voting on organization of the working group in order to review the standards. So what was proposed by the Eurofiling board is that since the ISO 5116, the DPM, when it was submitted, it was based on the 2014 versions developed by the CEN. We obviously know that in the course of the recent years, even the EBA and IOPA, one of the bigger users, so to say, or the biggest users of the DPM, have adapted the standard, quite greatly to their needs. Therefore, we observe that the standard will need review, will need, so to say, a bit of a revamp post acceptance as an ISO formal standard, and that is the stage in which we are right now. So so to say, the discussion and the conversation about establishing the working group is to follow in the early 2022. As you can see, these procedures in ISO can take necessarily some time, so just please be patient about these upcoming things. Obviously, the pandemic and the remote work here is quite interestingly not helping to speed things up. So we basically need to be patient about when these calls for interest are going to be put forward by the ISA community or officially, so to say, launch. And here is the point which I wanted to bring to your attention about the participating members. If you have a chance to look at the website of ISA and where the standard is published, this is, for instance, part 1. The standard is published in 3 parts, as you may know. Part 1 is the methodology for supervisor reporting, and there are 2 other parts. What is important for this formation of the working group is that if we go back to the formation, to the membership of the TC68, we need to look at the list, so to say, of members. And these list of members over here, as you can see, are primarily standardization bodies. These standardization bodies need to vote, and they need to delegate experts to the working group in order for the working group to be established. So if you would like to participate in the works of the working group, to which I highly encourage everyone who would like to contribute and help develop and maintain the standard and revamp it, please kindly contact your relevant participating member organization from your specific country, and please ask to be delegated to this specific task. There may be certain procedures according to which you may need to be recognized as an expert of a specific body. There might be certain application procedure. I have to tell you personally that I had to follow that when I was joining the Polish Normalization Committee in order to be delegated to the TC68 works. Therefore, you may want to consider this process within your country. Only these participating members are voting on the formation of the working group, and there needs to be at least, if I remember correctly, please bear with me here, but I believe there need to be 5 participating members who constitute, so to say, the working group when the call is being issued. So we believe that there will be already a couple of those members voting in favor. However, obviously, the more the better in this case, and we welcome any kind of contribution to and any kind of support to help shape the standard. So this is the update that I pretty much had to share, and I hope it was interesting. I'm happy to respond to any questions that may arise. And before that, maybe Ignacio, if you could check if Karla has perhaps had a chance to join us and she would like to add anything.
I think no. No, unfortunately, no. Karla was with us at the beginning of the event, but currently is lost in the cyberspace.
I think she apologized for this urgent, so to say, meeting that she has had. So on her behalf, I would like to also apologize. And this way, I think we can open the floor for any questions and answers. One other, I apologize, from the update that I had on the slide, I forgot to discuss one point: the so-called DPM refit project by IOPA, EBA, and the ECB. You may have heard about it from Carlos Martins from the EBA and Aitor Ascoaga from IOPA, who are one of the, so to say, leaders of the project, as well as Fernando Wagener from the ECB and some other colleagues. The DPM refit, as you may roll back actually on the Eurofiling website, you will find a presentation, I believe, from Carlos on this topic from one of our previous workshops. The DPM refit aims to exactly do the same thing as the revamp of the ISO 5116. Therefore, I was very, very happy to learn that the authorities, the EBA, IOPA, and ECB, believe that the contents and the proceedings from the DPM refit may, very well inform or constitute the foundation of the ISO 5116 review. So they will be definitely taken into account as the proceedings, obviously, as long as the authorities agree to either share or publish the results of the DPM refit review. I presume that some of that will definitely be public due to the fact that the DPM is obviously made publicly available in the form of the DPM dictionaries, the various XBRL taxonomies and the SQL databases and the annotated templates that all will be able to observe and learn what in the course of the DPM refit project was reviewed and was decided by the three authorities, and which parts of that may be valuable for the community at large during the 5116 review. So I believe that now concludes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that may have, that the audience may have.
Hi, Michal. I also was speaking about the DPM in the Committee for European Standardization, the CNN, that was the place in which the DPM was formalized. And why? Because after checking colleagues, the problem we have in the financial reporting sector is that we are not very close to standard bodies. And this is a problem because commenting the point with colleagues in other central banks, simply this is not a long tradition for us in the financial sector to be near the financial regulation and financial reporting, to be near the standard bodies. So the point that I am proposing to the CNN is to send a letter both to the national institutions for standardization and also to the relevant stakeholders, specifically to central banks and banking and insurance supervisors in Europe. The problem is that my colleagues in the CNN say, well, don't do that. Why you send a letter? Politically risky. Well, the typical problems. But anyway, I hope that during this Christmas, with you, Karla, and other colleagues, we can prepare this letter to be circulated.
Yes, I agree, Ignacio, that reaching for the standards bodies is maybe not the most agile and the most, so to say, efficient way in many countries. However, we just need to recognize that the standards, when they become ISO standards, they carry a lot of reputation, obviously, and ISO is protecting this reputation by making sure that all the review and changes to the standard are agreed upon by stakeholders, are according to the procedures and so forth. So I believe that overall, we are very optimistic now that the standard has been recognized. It's formally recognized. This changes a lot, as we know, for central banks around the world. We see increased, so to say, interest in the data point model. There are countries such as, and I of course forgot to mention, for which I apologize, one of the biggest users of the DPM in Europe is also the European Central Bank. But we see many central banks across Europe as part of the EBA or IOPA implementations. But we also observe interest from Southeast Asia. We observe interest from Caribbean countries, from African countries, and so forth, hence, as well as Latin American. So I believe that going forward, we will need to have such a layer of discussion, a logical layer of discussion and data understanding for whatever type of innovative technologies that we apply, be it for SupTech application or for RegTech application. I am aware of a range of vendors who rely heavily on the DPM dictionaries when they update their tools. The benefits over here include being quicker to market with adoption and changes management when they come from regulators. So I believe that considering all these different factors, we'll see not only enough pressure, but also enough interest and enough drive to make sure that over the next years, the different obstacles, such as going through more formal or rigid procedures and governance models, will just diminish, so to say, will just be irrelevant in the context of the application. From what EBA, IOPA, and ECB and SRB announced, the DPM is only going to be increasingly used across Europe. So I believe that this is our reality. This is something that we have achieved and will continue to grow as a community. I think that's something we can be quite proud of, to be honest.